I'm Rebecca Chen, 32 years old, and I never imagined I'd be sitting in my childhood home feeling like a defendant awaiting judgment rather than a daughter visiting family. My career as a wealth management consultant taught me everything about financial planning, or so I thought. Then my grandmother Lily passed away 6 weeks ago, and suddenly everyone in my family started acting peculiar. The text from my dad requesting this urgent family discussion made my stomach twist into knots. Entering their house that Tuesday night, the atmosphere felt suffocating. Then my parents delivered their bombshell about what they believed I should do with my inheritance money. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how things unraveled so spectacularly, I need to take you back to the beginning. Grandmother Lily wasn't just family, she was my compass, my confidant, the person who fundamentally shaped my worldview. Our Saturday morning breakfasts were non-negotiable rituals in my childhood. While other kids were glued to television screens, I sat across from Grandma Lily at her neighborhood cafe, absorbing her wisdom about growing up during economic hardship and the financial principles she'd mastered through experience. Lily had this remarkable gift for making money concepts accessible even to a young child. She'd divide her waffles into sections, explaining, this portion covers necessities, this one builds savings, this one supports others, and this tiny piece is for today's pleasure. That's how you create wealth, Rebecca, not by grabbing everything immediately, but by thinking ahead. Those teachings became part of my DNA. By 12, I'd created my own budget tracking system. At 15, I opened my first investment account with babysitting earnings. Lily would examine my quarterly statements with genuine pride, never dictating my choices but asking thoughtful questions that guided me toward sound decisions. My younger brother Kevin, 3 years my junior, approached money from an entirely different angle. Where I saved, he splurged. Where I strategized, he improvised. This fundamental difference became the defining characteristic of our sibling dynamic. Our parents responded to this contrast in deeply troubling ways. When Kevin burned through his allowance on video games and junk food within days, they'd quietly slip him extra cash. When he forgot to save for a class trip, they'd cover the cost. These weren't isolated incidents, they were established patterns. I remember being 16, having saved for 8 months to purchase a tablet for university preparation. The day I planned to buy it, Kevin demolished Mrs. Rodriguez's garden while attempting skateboard tricks. Rather than making him earn money for repairs, my parents raided my tablet fund, promising repayment. That promise evaporated. I worked an additional 6 weeks at the bookstore to recover the difference. This dynamic persisted into our adult years. I attended State University on partial scholarship, working nights to cover remaining expenses. Meanwhile, Kevin enrolled in an elite private institution, failed most courses, and received parental bailouts each term. I constructed my consulting career methodically, step by careful step. Kevin bounced between positions, always blaming corporate politics or supervisors who supposedly couldn't appreciate his vision. Despite everything, I maintained family connections. They weren't ideal, but they were what I had. I'd drive 3 hours to visit monthly, endure my parents boasting about Kevin's latest scheme, knowing it would probably collapse, and swallow my frustration when they asked me to revise his resume yet again. Grandma Lily was my sanctuary within these family dynamics. She recognized the unhealthy patterns and encouraged boundary setting while remaining compassionate. She'd always tell me, family matters, Rebecca, but never at the cost of your own well-being. When Lily received her stage 4 cancer diagnosis 14 months ago, I was shattered. The following 7 months blurred together, hospital vigils, midnight phone conversations, trying to ensure her comfort. I took leave from work to stay with her those final weeks, while Kevin visited exactly twice, both times pitching her on funding his craft brewery concept. After she died, grief ambushed me at random moments. I'd be perfectly fine, then find myself weeping in the grocery aisle because I spotted her preferred brand of tea. Lily had mentioned leaving me something in her will, though we'd never discussed specifics. Money had never been the foundation of our relationship, so I hadn't pressed for details. By this point, I'd built a solid consulting career. I owned a downtown condo, maintained a healthy retirement portfolio, and had enough discretionary income for occasional travel. I wasn't wealthy, but I was financially secure in ways that made me proud, especially before 35. Then came Dad's text 4 weeks after Lily's funeral: family meeting required this Friday. Be here by 6 p.m. Critical financial matters to address. The formality was jarring. Our family didn't hold meetings. We had chaotic holiday gatherings and occasional birthday celebrations, but never meetings. Something felt wrong. The drive to my parents' suburban house that Friday evening provided ample time for speculation. Late afternoon sunlight cast elongated shadows across the interstate as I replayed Dad's message repeatedly. Critical financial matters could mean anything, but combined with the formal tone and timing after grandmother's death, my instinct screamed this concerned the inheritance. Pulling into the familiar driveway, I noticed Kevin had already arrived. His gleaming silver convertible looked absurdly out of place beside my sensible sedan. For someone supposedly struggling financially, he always managed flashy possessions. I inhaled deeply, grabbed the wine bottle I'd brought, and approached the entrance. Mom answered immediately, her smile too brilliant, her embrace too prolonged. "Sweetheart, you made it. Come inside, come inside. Your father and Kevin are in the den." The house carried the aroma of Mom's lasagna, my favorite, which immediately triggered suspicion. She only made that when seeking something or preparing to deliver bad news. Dad rose to greet me with an awkward handshake rather than his customary hug. "Evening, Rebecca. Appreciate you coming on short notice." Something in his corporate tone sent chills down my spine. This wasn't my dad, the middle school English teacher who collected jazz vinyl. This was someone else entirely, someone with an agenda. Kevin sprawled on the sofa, barely glancing up from his phone. "Hey sis," he mumbled, his sleeve sliding back to reveal a watch I recognized as a luxury brand worth thousands. I quickly calculated how many months' rent that could cover for someone supposedly drowning in debt. We exchanged awkward small talk as Mom bustled around with appetizers far fancier than our typical family gatherings. I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she arranged crackers and cheese on a platter I'd never seen before, constantly glancing at Dad as if seeking reassurance. While helping her transport drinks to the den, I glimpsed documents stacked on the dining table. The words "last will and testament" were visible on the top page before Mom hastily concealed them with a table runner. "What are those papers, Mom?" I asked casually. Her laugh came too high, too fast. "Oh, nothing relevant right now. Let's just have some family time before dinner, shall we?" The evasion raised another red flag. In that instant, memories of similar scenarios throughout my childhood flooded back: the time Kevin wrecked the family car and I couldn't use it for my job interview, the Christmas when my gift was a sweater while Kevin received a laptop, the way they remortgaged their house for Kevin's first failed startup but couldn't contribute to my education. We settled in the den, an uncomfortable tableau of forced normalcy. Mom perched on her seat's edge, Dad kept checking his watch, and Kevin scrolled his phone, occasionally smirking at something on screen. The tension was suffocating. After what felt like hours of discussing weather and neighborhood gossip, Dad cleared his throat and sat straighter. "Well, I think we've waited long enough. Let's address why we're gathered." The words hung there like an executioner's blade. Mom clutched her napkin until her knuckles whitened. Kevin finally lowered his phone, suddenly engaged. As a wealth consultant, I'd facilitated hundreds of difficult money conversations with clients. I recognized the signs anywhere: the nervous gestures, the rehearsed opening statements, the strategic seating arrangements. My parents had positioned me in the hot seat, facing all three of them. This wasn't a family discussion. It was an ambush. Dad folded his hands on his lap, adopting what I recognized as his principal student conference posture. "Rebecca, you understand that family represents everything to your mother and me. We believe in mutual support through challenges." The rehearsed quality of his words made my skin crawl. I nodded slowly, already bracing for whatever came next. Mom interjected, eyes already glistening with tears she hadn't yet earned. "Your brother has been experiencing tremendous difficulties lately. The economy is simply brutal for young business owners. I suppressed, reminding her that at 29, Kevin was hardly a youth victimized by economic forces, and that I worked in finance and understood the economy quite well. Instead, I simply asked, "What's happening?" Kevin heaved a dramatic sigh, his expression suggesting practiced remorse with underlying entitlement. "I made some investments that tanked, and I've got creditors pressuring me hard. Nothing I can't eventually handle, but it's pretty intense currently." Dad cut straight to it more directly than I'd anticipated. "We've been discussing the inheritance Grandma Lily left you." The way he emphasized "you" carried resentment, as if my grandmother loving me enough to leave me something was somehow family betrayal. "Given Kevin's situation and the fact that you're doing exceptionally well financially," Dad continued, "we've decided the most sensible approach would be using your inheritance to eliminate Kevin's debts." The casual way he dropped this bombshell, as if merely announcing a menu change, left me momentarily speechless. I maintained my composed exterior, a skill refined through years of client meetings during market crashes. But internally, emotions erupted like a volcano. They weren't asking. They had decided about my inheritance without consulting me. Mom must have mistaken my silence for consideration, because she quickly added, "You've always been the responsible one, sweetheart. You have your excellent job and your condo. You don't genuinely need this money the way Kevin does." The implication that my financial stability, the result of years of discipline and careful planning, somehow justified taking what was rightfully mine made my blood boil. But I kept my face neutral, deciding that gathering information mattered more than expressing outrage. "How much are we discussing?" I asked, my voice steady. "Kevin owes approximately $250,000, Dad said. I nearly choked. That was significantly more than expected, and knowing my grandmother, likely most or all of what she'd left me. "We already contacted Martha's attorney," Mom added, her voice carrying the slightly guilty tone I recognized from childhood when she'd read my diary. "He mentioned there might be paperwork, but since your family, redirecting the funds should be straightforward." The realization that they'd approached Grandma's attorney before even speaking with me felt like a physical blow. But their statement contained a critical error, telling me they lacked the full picture, and I decided to let them continue digging their own hole. "Can you elaborate on these debts?" I asked Kevin directly. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting interrogation. "Just business loans mostly, and some credit card stuff." Dad jumped in too quickly. Kevin's last restaurant venture faced unexpected challenges. The location wasn't ideal, and there were contractor issues. "But I heard through our cousin Sam that it was thriving before it closed," I said innocently. "I actually considered investing myself at one point." Mom and Dad exchanged glances while Kevin suddenly found his water glass fascinating. "Well, there were complications," Mom said vaguely. I pressed further. "What kind of complications require $250,000 to resolve?" Kevin suddenly snapped. "Why does it matter? The business failed. I have debts, and you're sitting on money you didn't even earn. The least you could do is help family." The mask had slipped, revealing true entitlement beneath. I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment to process what was unfolding. As I locked the door behind me, I realized with painful clarity that my own parents viewed my financial responsibility not as something praiseworthy, but as an opportunity for exploitation. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to calm the emotional storm threatening to overwhelm me. The mirror reflected someone who appeared composed externally while crumbling internally. Looking around the familiar bathroom, I noticed small signs of extravagance absent during my last visit: new granite countertops, designer hand towels, expensive soap in a crystal dispenser. Where was this money coming from if they were so concerned about Kevin's debts? I decided to take a calculated risk. Instead of returning immediately, I quietly slipped down the hallway toward my father's home office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear my family still talking in the den. The office was meticulously organized as always, but a folder conspicuously left on the desk caught my attention. Kevin's Finances was written in my father's precise handwriting. Heart pounding, I quickly opened it. What I discovered confirmed my worst suspicions. This wasn't the first bailout. Records showed previous loans totaling over $100,000 in the past 4 years alone. None had been repaid. There were also printed screenshots of Kevin's social media showing lavish vacations to Thailand and Monaco that mysteriously coincided with when he claimed to be working tirelessly on his failed business. Most damning was a printed email from Kevin's ex-girlfriend Sarah dated 7 months ago, warning my parents that Kevin had a gambling problem and had borrowed money from dangerous people. They had apparently ignored her concerns completely. I quickly photographed the most important documents with my phone, then heard footsteps approaching. I slid the folder back and pretended to examine family photos on my father's bookshelf when my mother appeared in the doorway. "Rebecca, what are you doing in here?" Her voice carried suspicion. I smiled innocently. "Just looking at old photos. I miss Grandma Lily so much sometimes." Mentioning my grandmother caused exactly the reaction I expected. Mom's face softened with guilt, and she ushered me back toward the den without further questions. As we walked, I made a quick decision and whispered, "Mom, can I call my friend Sarah really quickly? I promised I'd confirm if I'm available for lunch tomorrow." My mother, eager to return to their planned manipulation session, nodded distractedly. "Make it quick though. Your father wants to finalize everything tonight." I stepped into my old bedroom, now converted to a guest room, and called Sarah, my best friend since college and the only person I trusted completely. She answered immediately. "Becca, aren't you at your parents' tonight?" I kept my voice low. "Sarah, you won't believe what's happening." My voice cracked slightly as I quickly explained the situation. Sarah's outrage was immediate and validating. "Are you serious? They're trying to steal your inheritance for your deadbeat brother after everything you've told me about how they enable him?" "I know," I whispered. "And I have evidence now that he's gambling and lying about his debts." "So what are you going to do?" Sarah asked. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to let them think I'm considering it while I gather more information." "But Sarah, there's something I haven't told them yet. Something Grandma Lily and I arranged before she died." Sarah gasped as I explained the rest. "Becca, you're brilliant. Or your grandmother was." "I have to go back before they get suspicious," I said. "I'll call you tomorrow with updates." After hanging up, I took a moment to compose myself. The pain of realizing my family saw me as nothing more than a financial resource was acute, but beneath it was steely resolve. I wasn't the pushover they clearly thought I was. When I returned to the den, I adopted a slightly uncertain expression, letting them think their manipulation was working. "I think I understand the situation better now," I said carefully. "Kevin, these debts sound really overwhelming." My brother nodded eagerly, probably thinking I was about to agree to their scheme. "It's been incredibly stressful, sis. I can hardly sleep." I highly doubted that given the luxury watch and convertible, but I kept that thought to myself. "I just have a few more questions," I said. "When did these gambling debts start?" The room went completely silent. Mom's face drained of color, and Dad sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing. "What gambling debts?" Dad asked sharply. "We never mentioned gambling." I feigned confusion. "Oh, I just assumed given the amount and urgency that there might be some unconventional debts involved. $250,000 is substantial for just business expenses." Andrew shifted uncomfortably. "It's not gambling. It's investments that didn't work out." "Like cryptocurrency or sports betting?" I asked innocently. The flash of panic in his eyes told me I'd hit the mark. 7 months before this uncomfortable family meeting, I sat beside my grandmother's hospital bed, holding her frail hand as she dozed. The doctors had given her 4 months at most, though she would ultimately defy expectations and live for almost 6 more. Lily had always been stubborn that way. When she opened her eyes, there was still that familiar sharpness despite the medications and pain. "Rebecca," she said softly, "I need to discuss something important with you." "Alone?" I glanced around the empty hospital room, confused. We are alone, Grandma. She smiled weakly. Good. I need you to call Gregory Patterson for me. He's my attorney. His number is in my phone. The seriousness in her tone made me comply without question. I found the contact and dialed, putting it on speaker. Lily, a male voice answered. How are you feeling today? Like I'm dying, Gregory, my grandmother replied with characteristic bluntness. But while my mind is still clear, I need to make some changes to my arrangements. I have Rebecca with me, she's the one I told you about. I was surprised. I'd never met Mr. Patterson, nor did I know my grandmother had discussed me with him. Mr. Patterson, professional but warm, said, Hello, Rebecca. Your grandmother speaks very highly of you. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. After brief pleasantries, my grandmother got straight to the point. Gregory, I need to change how Rebecca receives her inheritance. I don't trust my son and his wife to respect my wishes once I'm gone. The directness shocked me. Grandma, Dad would never. She cut me off with a gentle squeeze of my hand. Listen to me, Rebecca. I love my son, but I know him. He's always enabled your brother, and that's partly my fault for not being firmer when he was growing up. But what matters now is protecting what I've worked my entire life to build. Mr. Patterson spoke up. Lily, are you thinking about the trust option we discussed? Yes, she confirmed. I want everything moved into an irrevocable trust with Rebecca as the sole beneficiary. Can we make that happen quickly? We can, he assured her. I'll draft the paperwork and bring it by tomorrow. What about the existing will? Let it stand, she said, surprising me again. Let them think that's still the plan. I finally found my voice. Grandma, I don't understand what's going on. She looked at me with love and sadness mixed. Your parents have been asking me for money for Kevin's debts for years. I always refused because I knew it wouldn't help him long term. When I told them last month about my diagnosis, the first thing your father asked was how my estate would be divided. The revelation felt like a punch to the stomach. I made the mistake of telling them I was leaving most of my estate to you, she continued. I saw the look they exchanged, and I knew right then they would try to take it from you. But Dad wouldn't. Mr. Patterson interrupted gently. I've been Lily's attorney for 30 years, Rebecca. Trust me when I say we've seen this pattern before with your brother. Your grandmother is being prudent, not paranoid. Over the following weeks, as my grandmother's health fluctuated, I worked closely with Mr. Patterson to establish the trust. Back in my parents' den, the tension had reached a breaking point. I could see them all watching me, waiting for my response to their demands. Why didn't Grandma Lily leave anything to Kevin? I asked quietly. Surely she would have wanted to help him too if she knew he was in such trouble. The uncomfortable silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. Your grandmother had some outdated ideas about money management, he said dismissively. She didn't understand the challenges of entrepreneurship in today's economy. The way they disparaged my grandmother, who had been more financially savvy than all of them combined, made anger flare within me. But I kept my expression neutral. So what exactly are you asking me to do? I said, pretending to consider their proposal. Sign something? Transfer the inheritance when it comes through? Mom brightened immediately, thinking she was making progress. The attorney said you just need to sign a few documents redirecting the funds. We can help with all the paperwork. It was time. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming. Before we do that, there's something you all should know, I said calmly. 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me with varying degrees of wariness. I had a private conversation with Grandma Lily before she died, I continued, about her estate and her wishes. Dad frowned. Whatever she told you, the will is clear, and as executors. There's no money in the estate, I interrupted quietly. The statement hung in the air for a long moment before Mom found her voice. What do you mean no money? That's ridiculous. Your grandmother was quite well off. I maintained eye contact with my father, who was beginning to look distinctly uncomfortable. 7 months before she died, Grandma transferred all her major assets into an irrevocable trust. The will you're so eager to execute is essentially empty. Kevin's face contorted with anger. He exploded. Grandma had money. She owned her house. She had investments. All in the trust, I confirmed. Mr. Patterson helped her set it up specifically to prevent what you're trying to do right now. Dad's expression darkened dangerously. You're lying. We would have known about this. Would you? I asked quietly. When was the last time any of you actually visited Grandma without asking for money? When did you last spend time with her because you wanted to, not because you wanted something from her? Mom began to cry, but I noticed the tears seemed more frustrated than sorrowful. This is so unfair, she sobbed. We're your family. That money should help all of us. The irony wasn't lost on me. If I hadn't been prepared, they would have taken everything without a second thought, and now they were claiming unfairness. Dad shifted to intimidation, his voice dropping to the tone he used when I was a teenager in trouble. Rebecca, whatever game you're playing needs to stop right now. Your brother needs this money. If you're trying to negotiate for a portion, just say so. I almost laughed at how completely he misunderstood the situation. I'm not negotiating. I'm informing you that the assets you're trying to access don't exist in the estate. They're in a trust with me as the beneficiary. Kevin jumped to his feet. She's lying. She has to be. His face had turned an alarming shade of red. You spoiled, selfish, you've always thought you were better than me. Kevin. Mom gasped, but there was little conviction in her admonishment. Dad tried a different approach, his tone softening. Rebecca, honey, if what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying I believe it, we can work with this trust. You can still help your brother. That's what your grandmother would want. The manipulation was so transparent it felt insulting. Grandma specifically set up the trust because she knew you'd try to take the money for Kevin, I said calmly. She told me you'd been asking her for years to bail him out. Mom's tears stopped abruptly. That old woman never understood Kevin's potential, she said, her voice suddenly hard. She was always playing favorites with you. The mask had finally dropped completely. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Did you know that Virginia is a one-party consent state for recordings? I asked conversationally. That means only one person in a conversation needs to consent to being recorded. The blood drained from my father's face. You haven't been recording this? I smiled without humor. From the moment I walked in. Every word about taking my inheritance, Kevin's gambling debts you tried to hide, the commercial space he already put a deposit on counting on money that isn't his, everything. Dad stood up abruptly. Give me that phone, he demanded. I stood my ground. No. And before you get any ideas, the recording is already backed up to the cloud. Sarah has access, as does Mr. Patterson. Mom was looking at me like she'd never seen me before. How could you do this to your own family, she whispered. The hypocrisy was staggering. How could I? You were literally planning to steal my inheritance. I finally allowed some of my anger to show. You didn't even ask me. You decided, as if I have no say in what happens with what Grandma left me. The argument escalated from there. Mom's voice grew louder until I was certain everyone in the neighborhood could hear. She brought up every perceived slight from childhood, accused me of ingratitude for all their sacrifices, and eventually resorted to threats. If you don't fix this right now, you can consider yourself no longer part of this family, she said. Something inside me went very still at those words. Is that really how you measure family, Mom? By financial transactions? Because if withdrawing financial support means I'm not family, then what does it mean that none of you provided emotional support when Grandma was dying? Were you already not acting like family then? She had no answer for that. The weeks following that explosive family meeting were emotionally turbulent. Despite knowing I'd done the right thing, estrangement from my family left a void that physical distance hadn't prepared me for. There were moments when I questioned everything, wondering if I should have found some middle ground. But each time my phone lit up with a text from my parents those first few weeks, it wasn't to apologize or seek understanding, it was another manipulation attempt. Your brother is devastated. Dad is having chest pains from the stress. How can you do this to us? Each message confirmed I'd made the necessary choice, painful as it was. Sarah became my rock during this time. She cleared her schedule the weekend after the confrontation, showing up at my door with comfort food, wine, and willingness to listen as I processed everything. You did what you had to do, Becca, she assured me as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she set up that trust. She was protecting you because she loved you. But they're my family, I said, voicing the doubt that kept me awake at night. Aren't we supposed to help family no matter what? Sarah shook her head firmly. Family doesn't try to steal from you. Family doesn't favor one child while exploiting another. What they did wasn't love. It was opportunism. Her words were harsh but resonated with truth. Through Mr. Patterson, I discovered I wasn't the only one who had experienced my family's financial manipulation. My cousin Elena reached out after hearing about our confrontation, sharing her own story of how my parents had borrowed money for Kevin's college fund and never repaid it. My Aunt Susan, my father's sister who I'd always been told was estranged because she was difficult, contacted me with a similar story of financial exploitation. Finding these connections helped heal some of the isolation I felt. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't crazy for establishing boundaries. 4 months after the confrontation, I made a decision that honored my grandmother's legacy. I established the Lilychin Financial Literacy Foundation, using a portion of my inheritance to create educational programs for young adults. The foundation focused particularly on teaching healthy financial boundaries in relationships, something my grandmother had tried to instill in me from an early age. Nearly a year after the confrontation, my phone rang with my parents' number. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me to take the call. Rebecca, my mother's voice sounded smaller somehow, less confident than I remembered. We need to talk. The conversation that followed was revealing, though not in the way I'd hoped. Their financial situation had deteriorated. Kevin's latest venture had failed spectacularly, leaving them on the hook for loans they'd co-signed. They weren't calling to apologize or rebuild our relationship. They were calling because they needed money. I know we've had our differences, Mom said, carefully avoiding any mention of their attempted theft, but we're still family, and family helps each other through difficult times. The irony of her using the exact same language wasn't lost on me. I'm happy to help you find a good financial counselor, I offered, and I can recommend some resources for debt management. But I won't be providing funds. Dad took the phone then, his tone oscillating between anger and forced pleasantness. This isn't about counseling, Rebecca. We need actual help. Surely that trust of yours has plenty to spare. I held firm to my boundaries. I'm sorry you're in this situation, but I can't give you money. That would just be continuing the cycle that's gotten Kevin to this point. The call ended with my father calling me selfish and heartless, words that once would have devastated me but now simply confirmed I was making the right choice. Today, I live a life I believe would make my grandmother proud. The trust she established has allowed me not only to secure my own future but to help others through the foundation. I've developed deep, meaningful friendships that provide the emotional support family should. And I've learned to define family not by blood but by mutual respect and genuine care. To those of you facing similar situations, remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Financial manipulation within families is more common than many realize, and recognizing it is the first step toward breaking the cycle. My grandmother once told me, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. At the time, I didn't fully understand. Now I do. Your worth isn't measured by what you give to those who take, but by the boundaries you set to protect your peace.